Tonight's guest not only debuted her artwork in the 1994 set Legends, but she also got a bachelor's in anthropology, a master's in library studies, and has been contributing fantasy art ever since the 1970s. Her name is Liz Danforth, and she has as much talent as she does a work ethic. A person with a fragile ego and no work ethic might be intimidated or even feel like a loser compared to those kind of accomplishments, but luckily I am a vampire, and living forever means you can take your time accomplishing things. I cleaned the castle this morning even. Well, I thought about cleaning it. The main point is I'm not a loser. And with that said, enjoy part one of my interview with Liz.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Okay. You have like a slew of degrees. Well, you're multifaceted. That's an understatement. But anthropology degree. When did that, like, how do you go from anthropology to art, and how's your mind work? It's just.
If I knew, we would be having probably a different conversation. For me, anthropology was, I was always interested in people and places around the world. And that was the work that I expected to do once I went to college. Partially it was pure serendipity. I was very sick the weekend before I was supposed to go to university. I was raised in Tucson, went up to school at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. And I ended up getting on campus late so that all the normal 101 courses were already spoken for. And I was able to find classes that I felt like I knew enough about that didn't have prerequisites, but they were usually like sophomore, junior, senior level anthro courses. And that ended up leading me to getting that as my main degree. I wanted to do everything. As you say,
Yeah,
I'm interested in everything.
You do seem to be interested in everything, and like apparently you are able to do very many of those things too. So maybe taking it back a little bit earlier, I'm kind of curious about your family. What sort of background does your family have as far as what they did for livings, and what was the environment like growing up for you that would create somebody such as yourself?
My dad was the director of public works for the city of Tucson when I was growing up, civil engineer. Okay. And, my whole family did arts of various kinds, so that I was surrounded by it. My dad was a weekend painter. We had a ceramic kiln in the side yard.
Wow.
And so there was, my dad did sculpture like polyclay kinds of early stuff. My brother, I had an older brother and sister. My sister did the famous artists course, and she went on to get her degree in fashion design. My brother was playing with lapidary stuff. My mom did ink work and oil paintings, and none of it was professional for the two of them. They just did it because they did it.
I see.
And so, I can remember my mom sitting me down at the kitchen table saying, "Here's oil paints, have fun." I must have been like 10.
Wow.
But the thing is I didn't think I was any good. And it took me years to realize they were a lot higher level than I was, because everybody was older. I was the youngest child.
You were comparing yourself to them, not realizing.
And I didn't realize that I just needed time and experience.
You just need to be alive longer.
Yeah, to level up. So I ended up going into art instead of anthro because people were willing to pay me for it, honestly. And anthropology, I did a lot with Southwestern archaeology. I did a lot with early, I was fascinated with the early civilizations in the Near East, but of course that was, even then, wasn't a place you could casually go, oh, I'm going to go dig up a tell in Iran.
No.
And one of my advisors was actually a student of Jane Goodall's. So I went into primatology for a little while.
What?
And that was great. But about that same time was when Diane Fossey was killed with her research on the gorillas. And I said, if I'm not going places where I'm going to get shot just for walking off the plane, that would be okay. And meanwhile, I had discovered Tunnels and Trolls, which was the second oldest fantasy role-playing game. And people were going, hey, will you draw my character? And I said, sure. And they said, and we'll pay you for it. And it was like, sure. Okay, that's great.
Much more enthusiastic, sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was an enthusiastic, we would sit and play, and I would be sitting there sketching while we were playing anyway. So that was, that was just a natural segue. Ken St. Andre, who was the creator of Tunnels and Trolls, suggested I, do a magazine cover for Supernova, which was Flying Buffalo's play-by-mail little game, booklet about their play-by-mail games. I did that. Then there were solitaire adventures to illustrate for TNT. I started working for Flying Buffalo for about 7 years.
How old were you when this was right out of school?
Pretty close to right out of school, because my folks were willing to pay for a bachelor's degree, but both my brother dropped out before he finished. And my sister basically got her MRS degree, as they say. She completed her degree, immediately got married, immediately started having kids, and never went into the business. So here I came along later, and they're going, first of all, you can stay, even though I was the most academic and the most scholarly of the three of the kids. They said, first of all, you'll stay in town, even though I was accepted at places like McGill University and some other places that were out of state. They said, stay in town. And they did let me go to Phoenix instead of staying in Tucson. But my only other alternative for Arizona was going up to Flagstaff, which I would have been fine, except that it seemed like that was a snow bunny.
Right.
I learned later it wasn't, but at the time I thought it was just where snow bunnies and cowboys went, that you couldn't get any kind of academic education up there.
I see.
And for anthropology, I should have stayed here in Tucson.
Well, yeah, but then you had sort of had moved on from it, right? You had.
It wasn't that I had moved on from it at that point. It was that I wanted to get out of that house. I didn't want to keep living with my parents.
Right.
And
yeah.
I had that choice back then. I mean, they said, you can go to any college as long as it's in Arizona. And
was that because of the costs of going to state versus going to out of state?
No, they wanted me to keep tabs on me because Louise and Robert had gone out of state and then wasted their degree.
That's a bummer.
It was, but in my sophomore year, my dad died.
Oh,
and
sorry.
By the time, it's a long time ago now.
Yeah, but that's young. That's young.
Yeah, he was a World War II vet. He'd been in the Naval Reserve. He smoked like a stack and had died of lung cancer. Exactly what you would expect.
Yeah.
But that meant Mom wasn't willing to pay for me to get an advanced degree. I had to go out and start earning a living. And artwork was something I was being paid for. And so after doing secretary jobs and working at, I had a zoology minor. And
Wow. What haven't you dabbled in? Like, is there anything that you haven't dabbled in? I mean,
sports.
well, if that's fine. I mean, like,
Yeah.
but as you're saying, so you got your zoology minor and you were doing art.
Yeah, I mean, and all of that comes into my art ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Zoology allows me to make fantastical beasts that make sense. The anthropology allows me to draw from around the globe and across time.
I was going to ask, does like, I don't know much about anthropology studies, but I'd imagine like, is there cartography studying into that? And is that what possibly makes you, would make you, but that you do all of the maps and I thought maybe that fed into it on some level.
At some level, it probably does, because I would have seen a lot of that because along with prehistory, I was also studying a certain amount of history. And certainly by the time I started doing tabletop RPGs, all the research that you would do and in the game design work, you're looking at all kinds of things around the world. And so, yeah, all of that. I would like to think that everything I read and study can be put to use. They say that creativity is not pulling shit out of your ass, as they say.
No.
It is finding things that haven't been brought together before and making them go together.
Mm-hmm.
And that by having a very broad liberal arts education, which is literally what it was, and an interest in things from around the world and across time. I would say tabletop RPGs gave me more of a taste for history, whereas my anthro I was more interested in prehistory. It was like, oh, once they start writing, who cares? But that wasn't, I got over that after a while.
And then you also have I would say a very complicated or complex relationship with your writer self. Like I've read through a lot of, what you said, and you sort of, you go back and forth. It feels like that you very much, you are a writer because you do create these worlds. I think that is obviously the case, but you seem to have a tumultuous relationship with it, but you can't not do it. Is that something that you still feel is applicable now, or have you eased into it?
If you had asked me when I was 15, if you'd said, when you get old, you're going to be well known for what creative work, I would have automatically said, for all the books I've written.
Wow.
Okay. I always wanted to write. I remember trying my first real dedicated story writing when I was 11. There was a book called The Epic of Man, which was a Time Life book about the early history, again, my anthropology interests. And I said, I want to write stories about the pictures, because it was beautiful art, paintings in the book. And my dad, who was also, sought to be a writer, he was working on a novel about the Great Fire of Chicago. And he said, let's write Time Life and ask for permission to use their work in your story. And by God, I got a letter back saying, you have our permission.
Wow.
And I still have that letter.
I bet.
And nothing ever came of it. I was 11. I didn't know enough to have a routine, have a discipline. But again, going back to that question of, I'm not a very good artist, why would anybody want to have me do this on a regular basis? I had the same ground level as the people around me as a writer. I was in writers groups in college and afterwards for many years. And I always felt like I had more I could talk about with other writers than I did with other artists, because I'm largely self-taught as an artist.
Yeah, and I read that you actually said that was one of the examples of bad advice that you got was people telling you to quote unquote develop your style.
Yep.
And and from what I'm gathering, I feel like you might have benefited more from a traditional artistic education rather than that. Could you elaborate on what that means?
What it is among other things, I mean, it wasn't, my mom said my dad was a better artist before he took classes. And that actually was the bad advice I got. I took that to mean I need to develop my own style. Anything else is not going to be me somehow.
Oh.
I was also academic enough that getting straight A's, or as near as I could manage, was really freaking important. And I couldn't be sure of that about art, especially if I didn't think I was any good. Okay, so rather than, back when I was a kid, having a creative, if you will, education in middle school and high school was still part of what was expected. And in my case, that meant I had to, in I think it was 7th grade, I had to either take band, orchestra, or art. Art would have been logical, and I said, wasn't interested in band, so I literally took up the violin rather than take an art class. I already had spent 11 years playing the piano, so I had a musical inclination.
Okay, wow. So you also do music too. Did you learn the violin as well?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, I wasn't as good. The piano I took to better, but it got me through the year that I would have been taking art class, so
That's
that I didn't have to
insane.
take art.
Violin's difficult. Violin is not an easy instrument.
It is, and I never got good at it.
I mean, but you were proficient though, right? I mean,
I was doing okay. Yeah.
I mean, I did not do okay. Piano was my thing. I taught myself piano, but violin, I barely made it to Beethoven's Ode to Joy, and that was it. Like, that
was way more than I got.
Oh, I mean, but only the first, only the beginning, not the entire piece, just the famous hook, the one that would be a hit on the radio if it was out today.
Again, my folks did music, and we had an upright piano when I was little, and I was always trying to play on it. And so they started me in piano classes literally before 1st grade.
That's early.
And I think I was like in 2nd grade when they bought a baby grand, which I literally only got rid of like 2 years ago.
Oh, why did you get rid of it? Was it just too old, or what happened?
I wasn't playing it, and my hands are good for art, but doing an octave is no longer comfortable.
Gotcha.
And it was like, I don't have time for this. It actually was a magnificent instrument, even at its age, because it was almost 100 years old.
Wow, what kind of piano was it? What brand?
It was a Chilling, back in the days when those were, before they were sold to somebody else. I was told it was, it was supposed to be an excellent piano at the time, but I literally practically couldn't give it away. I tried to sell it.
Oh my God.
Nobody wants a baby grand. Nobody has room for it.
That's not I think that's the thing. Because I play piano, but I very rarely get to play those big instruments, but it's the space. That's the problem.
And I needed the space here. I ended up giving it to Tucson Parks and Rec.
That's awesome.
I said, if you will come and pay to have it, you can have it. You move it, it's yours.
That's generous. I mean, because there's so many, this is off topic, but like Nina Simone, for instance, like she wasn't able to get accepted into any of the music schools because people had this idea about urban youth but she didn't have access to the instruments the way that other other privileged students did, and it's just like it makes such a difference when kids have access to any kind of instrument, especially something like the piano, where you can't afford one if you like a guitar. I mean, people save up. A guitar is at least in sort of like the window of possible, but pianos are expensive.
Out of the question. Yeah, no, and I definitely grew up fairly privileged. There's no question about it. And I'm grateful for that. It gave me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise, including the piano and the art and all the rest of it.
But you also have a very, like, you seem very grounded. You do not seem like somebody who is, I mean, there's many people who have unaware of privilege, and I think that's the rub, when people aren't aware that they've had it good, and then they sort of just are
Oh, I worked so hard. It's all
Yeah.
on me. No, it's not. I got
Yeah.
it. I didn't get it on a silver platter, but I did get it on a Limoges platter.
So now I read, and this could be wrong, but your first commission piece did it have to do with Star Trek? Is that true? Okay, so
I'll put it this way. That was my first fanish thing, fan-related science fiction. The first thing I was paid for was, I believe, somebody was running for sophomore student council in high school. And they said, will you paint me a poster? And I misspelled sophomore.
That's classic.
But for Bijo Trimble, her Star Trek Concordance, she'd seen my artwork. I'd gone to one of the early, I'd gone to a WesterCon, I'd gone to Equicon, which was an early Star Trek convention. I did a Star Trek fanzine. I was one of the early Star Trek fanzine people. And Bijo Trimble had seen my stuff. She said, do you want to do some artwork? We need some filler art. Just do whatever you want, let me know. And I did, and she did. And that, that was my first genre, if you will, paid commission.
And did that start to open the doors to the other things? With, I would imagine that's like put your name out in circles that needed to know it.
I guess sort of. More it was, I continued to go to science fiction conventions constantly from that point on. And I was invited to take part in, the gentleman has passed on now, but one of the major, he was a very big figure in fandom in, probably the late 60s, early 70s, a man named Bruce Pells.
Mm-hmm.
And he spent many years getting the artists of the time to do the fan tarot deck, which has become almost legendary. And I have a card in there because he saw my work at the science fiction conventions.
Wow. So he sort of basically went around and kind of figured out who was who, or who was up and coming, and like lassoed them into projects.
All kinds of people, certainly all of the names you could conjure with back then were, George Barr and Alicia Austin and Tim Kirk and people like that. Maybe not household names now. I wouldn't be a household name in that community. I am in gaming a little bit.
I'd say so.
Yeah, maybe.
Hey, you got a Wikipedia page. I mean, that's all I'm saying. All I'm saying.
The Wikipedia page is horrible. I've got somebody who I've hired to try and help me when she has time for it. But
why is it horrible? It seems at least, I mean, it's well written. I mean, I'm not sure. Is it because it's not factual, or?
No, there's a lot of stuff that's missing.
Oh, okay.
I had worked with another person about 5 or 6 years ago to get it brought up to date and make sure that all of the, everything citation needed was cited and provided. And she put it up, and the gatekeepers immediately took it down.
What?
And it became this endless fight. She didn't want to fight. I didn't want to fight about it. We didn't know whether it was just the way Wikipedia works, or misogyny, or
I think that
whatever.
I think that Wikipedia has gotten better. I think at one point in time, years ago, they were a little too draconian with like what they accepted, and then I think that was in response to being completely loose, like, because there was a time when anybody
could write anything.
yeah, and we're making like Wikipedia pages, for themselves. They, ran the local theater and they've never been in a play, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I think that's probably was the case, because now it's certain, it's sort of automated and you can insert the references. It's much more user friendly. But so when was it that what led you to getting involved with Magic? Like around, because I'd like to know around what age were you then? I mean, I imagine you're still in your 20s. Is that correct, or what led to that door opening?
I can tell you the story of how it opened, but I'd have to look at the art literally to see what the dates on it are.
Well,
tell you how old I was. The one that I remember doing were Rust and Devouring Deep. However, they were published a little later. And also the piece that was Soul Ring, which has its own story, because I heard SOUL.
Oh.
And because it was all done over the phone at the time.
Right.
And so what I did wasn't what they needed. And so that piece eventually ended up in Everway rather than anywhere else because it didn't fit Magic. That I think has an earlier date on it, but we're talking, I think, what?
We're talking 94, 90,
95.
Like, yeah, 94, 95. It's looking like around the time that you were, I think 94 might have been your earliest. Although no, yeah, I think so. 94 looks like that was around the time that you had debuted, so to speak, in the game.
You're very kind to assume that I was still in my 20s at that point.
Oh, well.
Most of the artists they were right out of college.
Yeah. And I mean,
I'd already been making my name in the tabletop side. I had been working for Game Designers Workshop on Traveler. I'd been working on Tunnels and Trolls for Flying Buffalo. I worked for everybody and their brother. Lisa Stevens, who now runs Paizo, was at the time working for Wizards of the Coast, and I already knew her. And we were having dinner together at either, I don't remember now whether it was an Origins or a Gen Con, but I remember I was sitting on her right, she was on my left, and she held up this card and said, "We're doing this new game. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Jesus God, how can you even print so many cards with color on them?" Because at the time, everything interiors were black and white. We had just gotten color on covers because it was too expensive to print color. She said, "Oh, well, we're doing it. So are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." She said, "All right, I'll introduce you to Jesper Meifers." And I met him, I think, in the corridor the next day. He recognized me. Obviously, I had no reason to know who he was at that point.
But you were kind of, I mean, amongst them, you were like sort of the star. I mean, you had been like.
They already knew. I already had a track record.
Right.
But the thing is that 99% of my work at that point, maybe 95, was black and white work. I had all the work I could do doing interior black and white art, but very little painting. And when Jesper told me what the offer was, it was like, I get 3 times that much for a black and white drawing. I can't do a painting for that little. And he said, "Well, that's the deal." And I went home and I thought about it. And I said, "They're paying me to learn to paint better." And it wasn't in dollars and cents, it was in experience and practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Yep, absolutely. I'll do as much as I can."
And that worked out for you, very much so. That was a very good decision, but that's also neat because you were using it as a springboard to learn to paint color, is what you're saying.
I'd always wanted to do more, but because I had more experience as black and white, the publishers I worked with, occasionally I would get, a color assignment or I'd beg for one, but my stuff wasn't that great yet. I mean, I don't think it's that great now, but
I mean, but it's well, first, I mean, I love it, but but
Thank you.
it is not something that you would expect somebody to say, oh, I was just attempting to do whatever at that point in time. Like that would not be a way I would have described it. I would assume that this person knew what they were doing 100%. And it's shocking really to me that that you really kind of were like testing.
I'd been doing my best to study as much as I could, but I had such a steady flow of assignments that I didn't have time to do work on spec or just for myself. So I needed an assignment to have the time to do the paintings that I wanted to do. So I had to ramp up and, OJT as fast as I possibly could, and as well as I could. I consider myself, I'm still learning to be a better painter.
That's a really, I mean, that's a very honorable way to think. I think that, I'd imagine everybody, whatever it is that you're trying to be good at, if you're not taking that attitude, I think that's a sign that something's wrong, because that means you're going to be blocking something, or that, you might have gone on an ego trip or something like that.
I don't want to, the thing that would scare me the most is to rest on my laurels, because there's always 1,000 people wanting to take your space.
Right.
I am fortunate. I don't think I could break in right now. There's so many brilliant artists out there right now that I don't think I would ever get a chance like that today.
But at the same time, though,
at the time, I did.
Yeah. And you also, I mean, and not to bring everything, I'm not trying to, bring it to this thing, but you're a woman in an industry that, well, most industries are very like a male dominated industry. And what I found fascinating was that you said that you did not actually have to deal with much misogyny in your career, and that you showed up, and because you were respected, you got stuff done. Is that true? Is that from what I read?
Yeah, no, that's accurate. It baffles me, and that people want to say, oh, there were no women in gaming early. No, we were not as numerous, but Jill Lucas ran FASA during the days of BattleTech and Shadowrun and all that. Julie Martin was, part and parcel of it. We first started hearing about things like this in I've got a 1998, I think, Women in Gaming calendar, which is just us. It's just headshots, because people were going, well, there's no women in gaming. And it was like, yeah, there are. Here's 12 of us, just to start the conversation off.
Yeah, that's weird.
There weren't a lot in, and there were dozens of female artists, Amy Weber and Margaret Organ Keene and Melissa Benson. We were all there. If there is anything like erasure, that does seem to happen.
Interesting.
I don't know whether this is a story you're going to want to include or not. It's one I've told otherwise. I'll tell it, and then we can decide whether you want to keep it or not.
Yeah, go fire away.
In the Academy of Gaming Arts and Design is the creative branch of the Game Manufacturers Association, GAMA. And every year they have a Hall of Fame nomination for games and for individuals. And for the 1995 year, which was given in 1996, I was inducted into the Academy of Gaming Arts and Design Hall of Fame. Some years later, there was we're going to bring together all of the Hall of Fame people to be presented at Origins. This was their I don't know, 20th, 30th, 40th anniversary. I don't remember which one it was. And all of us are standing up there on the stage in the order we were brought in. Everybody who was attending, everybody who was still alive, some of them weren't. And the MC is going down the line, introducing each of us. Went by me, went to the next person after me. The person after that was Larry Elmore, of which he said Larry is the first artist to have been inducted into the Academy of Gaming Arts and Design. And there was this muttering through the hall, and he looked around a little nervously and just kept going. And everybody, is looking at me, and I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. It was just like, whatever.
But what the fuck? I mean,
and the reason it's worse than just passing on me as an artist, and the MC obviously didn't do his job of knowing who the people were.
Or what the award was, it sounds like. I mean, it's like,
I wasn't even the first artist.
Wow.
Julie Guthrie, another female sculptor of miniatures, was inducted into it many years before me.
Interesting.
And both Julie and I were passed over. I love Larry. I think he's an awesome person and an amazing artist. But he was the third artist, not the first.
Yeah, and he didn't do that. Like, it wasn't him who made it.
It wasn't him in any way, shape, or form. He looked just as embarrassed.
Yeah.
And the MC came up to me later and apologized. And it was like, that's fine. I think I said, you really should have done your homework.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it was disappointing. It was really disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting, because I never thought of that, but there is, that could be a situation where it's like, if there are women that are prominent and there are men that do not like that, then erasure is a way to make it go away without, having to sort of result to like the older ways of misogyny. That's and the fact that dude like had the chutzpah to name Larry as something, and then yet that would imply that he did some sort of research, or at least he had thought he did, and then
Larry was way more famous than me. And also just the fact that, Julie wasn't even Julie had moved on. She'd gone on to more professional, non-game related sculpting. And her work was always magnificent and still is the last time I saw it. It's easy to forget that although, I was one of the young Turks, as it were, at the time I got the award, there was an entire generation of people behind me, like Rick Loomis, who ran Flying Buff.
Yeah.
And people don't know what they did. They don't know who they are. Rick Loomis, to some degree, they still remember. But if you look at the Academy or even the games, memories are short. And I don't think that this was a deliberate failure on this kid's part, but it was simply, that was before his time, so it didn't exist. He failed as an MC. It was his job to have done the research.
Yeah, that's my take on it. I'm like, if you have like, as a journalist, if I don't know about the person I'm speaking to, then to me, that's my idea of hell, like being unprepared for an interview. So it's like, you do your job, bud. Like, that's basically it. I mean, I'm sorry that happened, but we'll take it on to some more like positive things. Now, speaking of again, you're doing everything. You've done like mosaics, you've done copper, you've done cloth mache, and medical tourism.
Yes, before it was a thing.
I need to, I mean, like medical tourism, I'm a dum-dum. Help me. I feel like I know what that is, but I don't know what that is. What is medical tourism?
The easy thing that everybody has heard about is to run across the border into Mexico to get your teeth done for a fraction of what it costs to get it done in the States.
Okay.
Okay, what I did, because I had no health insurance, I worked up to 39 and a half hours a week
Oh,
for the Phoenix Public Library, and I needed to have my gallbladder taken out. I knew some folks who worked for some of the NGOs overseas, and they said, have you considered going to Bangkok? And I said, what?
wow.
And they said, this was a woman who usually vacationed in Bangkok. She usually, when I first met her, she was working in Cairo. She was working in Mali at the time. Like I said, she was working for the non-governmental organizations, charity work, and so forth.
Globetrotter.
Very much so, but she was an Australian. And she said, look into it. And because I was working for the library, I put on my librarian hat and spent 11 days researching as hard as I could to find out what was going on, what my options were, because I'd been told it, and this is 20, 30 years ago at this point, it would be $12,000 cash on the barrelhead for me to do it here in the States. And there was pretty much the implied statement that it would cost more, that they would hand me a bill after that that 12,000 would be enough to get me in the door.
Oh,
Okay, with no insurance. Bumrungrad Hospital in Bangkok advertised themselves as first world care at third world prices. I was able to choose my own doctor. He was ethnic Chinese, living in Thailand, trained in England, in Leeds. And it was quite an adventure on many counts, not the least of which because my passport was going to expire almost too soon. You're supposed to have a passport good for 3 months before you go to a different country.
yeah.
And mine was due to expire in like 2 months and 3 weeks. Okay. So, and I had never heard that as stipulation. I figured as long as I was only going to be there 2 weeks.
But what about, like, that's all the recovery that would be needed?
Well, it's all done laparoscopically.
Oh, okay.
Unless there's a problem, in which case, again, your numbers, your costs go way up. I talked to my friends. I found, I have a writer friend. I know a lot of writers because of my own work.
Yeah.
My ex also was a New York Times bestselling author. So I ran with the science fiction writers crowd. But Yvonne Navarro is a very accomplished author in her own right, but she had the flexibility and the time to go with me. I paid her way to go with me to Thailand, so I had somebody with me. I arrived on Saturday night. I saw the doctor on Monday morning with my scans and all of the x-rays and all the blah, blah. He did more of his own. He sent me over to their cardiologist who spoke better English than I do. They took blood, they did the x-rays. I went back and saw him, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, or 3 o'clock in the afternoon rather, like I said, I'd been in the hospital maybe 6 hours, 7 hours max. And he said, so, okay, yes, you definitely need your gallbladder out, gallbladder stones removed and gallbladder. And when do you want to do it? I said, I have a flight back in 2 weeks. He said, do you want to do it tomorrow? I said, yes. And the next morning I was on the operating table, and 8 days after surgery, I was on the back of an elephant in one of their national forests.
Wow. That's
Uh,
awesome.
my recovery time was spent at one of their very high-end. I was going to go down to one of their marine um, national preserves, and the doctor said, "I'd rather you didn't get on a plane for about a week." And I said, "Okay, what do you suggest instead?" And he said, "Well, Hua Hin is where the royals go to vacation, and you could probably get a nice place there." It was like going to Monterey or Hilton Head Island here in the States. It was very high end. It was for
Wow.
the price of nothing.
Whoa.
And so I was swimming in, the Bay of Thailand. Like I said, just, taking tours, being at the spa, relaxing. I was able to get there. We had a very long taxi ride, basically, instead of getting on a plane from Bangkok. And went back to Bangkok a day or two before ready to leave the country. Got another very inexpensive hotel. Everything was incredibly cheap. There's a
That's
reason.
nuts.
There's a
Yeah.
reason Chiang Mai, up in the north part of Thailand, is one of the places expatriates go to live on a reduced income. It's hard to grow old in the United States. If you've got a little bit of money, but not a lot, Chiang Mai is one of the places people go.
That's because it's just the you move over there and all of a sudden you're up in a tax bracket, right? Is that what you're kind of saying?
That basically your dollars go so far that it's like being insanely wealthy in the States.
That's madness. I mean, that blows my mind the way that can happen. It's so strange, but I mean, and the surgery obviously worked out because you are. I mean, you're here talking to me. Which, by the way,
amazing.
I will say this: you do not look your age. By the way, I mean, is it true that you were 70? I mean, is that
almost?
I'm
68, going on 69.
Yeah, you don't look.
All
you
genetics.
Don't. Yeah, well,
this is not died. That's the color it comes.
That's natural. Okay,
Yeah.
See, there you go. I mean, but I wouldn't have guessed it. It's just, I was like, yeah, I guess 60, but I'm just saying, maybe the gallbladder surgery was super rejuvenating too as well. But I do want to ask about the painting Frost and Fire. I think it's called Frost and Fire. It's now that one.
Winter.
Pardon me?
Winter.
I'm sorry.
No, Frost and Fire is what I call it, but it's a painting of winter.
Oh, okay. Well, so it's a painting of winter, but why do you call it Frost and Fire then? Is it because of the sexy man and the?
It's a little embarrassing. This is a character that I have written about. I have played in a couple of different games. He was my World of Warcraft mage. My headcanon is of him as a very different character than he is in anything but my fiction. And the Gathering book, much like the Magic cards, the original Magic cards, gave me an opportunity to just paint anything I wanted. And I'd wanted to paint a good portrait of Winter for years and never had the time, occasion, or means to, because the Gathering book was paint whatever you want. It was like, here's my chance. And I did exactly that. And it was, I'd had a sketch that was somewhat related, that was originally illustrated for a story I'd written, where essentially someone had come knocking on his door, and the original picture was more at night, and there's a light in an upstairs room, and he comes to the door with just a coat thrown over himself. He's buck naked otherwise. And I changed that for the other painting because it just didn't look, it was amusing as the original painting. But I also knew that buck naked was not going to cut it for the Gathering book. And so I designed the painting specifically to be cropped exactly where it is.
Oh, really? Okay. So that wasn't that. So when it was the way it's cropped in the book, that was not a disappointment to you. You'd planned that.
No, I had planned that from day one.
Because I was gonna say, like, the full version. I mean, it's before its time in a sense that, like, there's plenty of sexualization of females in the fantasy games. It's nice to see a man thrown in there every once in a while. I mean, and you throw in the divot too. I mean, the divot. It's like that's racy. It was. I mean,
it's funny because this has been one of the comments made about my art. I am perfectly happy to draw half-naked women and half-naked men. And if you look, I just ran across recently some of my old illustrations for City of Terrors, which was one of the most highly illustrated solos. And going through the original art, I show a lot of male hips.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to complain.
I'm not going to complain. And I mean,
but you're right.
For women.
But you also, I'm going to mispronounce this, but I think it's Limdul's Hex is the artwork that you did for Magic, where, I mean, she is, I mean, it would be easy to just say, like, oh, why is she only wearing a cloth? So, but it is what you were saying. You don't mind doing it. There isn't that hang up that you have, that people have with nudity, or with implied nudity, I guess would be the thing.
I know enough to know that, I have had occasions to draw straight up porn, that is intended to be very sexual.
Now, when you say porn, do you mean, because I think probably erotica, because porn is this very specific, porn is more of, I think, focusing on penetration versus erotica, which is it's sexual, like leading to sex, but not maybe necessarily the actual act of it, where you're seeing.
That's a good distinction, and that's not one I'd heard before.
Yeah, I think because
erotica.
Yeah.
Erotica would be correct. I also make a very strong distinction between sexualized and sexy.
Yes, absolutely.
And sexualized has only one focus, ultimately.
Yes.
Sexy is a lot more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I try, whether I'm painting women or men, Limdul's Hex, despite the fact that she is literally falling apart in the shadows, is a sexy woman.
It's also, I have just a sidebar. I love the way that it sort of looks. It has a feel of like those classic paintings, like, almost like a Renaissance painting.
Precisely what I was chasing.
It's sort of like a weird, like a dose of like Salvador Dali, but with like a Renaissance kind of feel to it. It's just, it's really cool. But when I saw that, I thought, wow, it's nice to see a female painter that is sort of not afraid to go down that road with any of their, their paintings. And I'm not implying that women are, it's just, now I do believe that there's just a chance that women have not been given to men being sexualized at all has been, a big no-no for a long time. You have to look strong, but men can't look sexy, because I feel like that has to do a little more with misogyny than anything else, because to look sexy is feminine, and then feminine, the whole thing.
Masculinity is a disgrace.
It's
all the way around.
Yeah, it sucks out loud is the way I'd say. But it's a very cool thing. And then one of the things that I wanted to know about was Gem Bazaar. Is there, because I looked online for a larger scan of it and I couldn't find it, and I love the piece. And is there, like, do you have copies of like the paintings, like scans of anything like that? Because it's such a bummer. Like I would love to see a higher detailed version of it, but I couldn't find one.
Right, and unfortunately, no, I don't. That one sold almost as fast as I finished painting it.
Mhm.
And back then I didn't have a scanner of my own, and it didn't really occur to me to do it. What I do have is that's on my very short list of repaints.
Okay. Yeah.
And I may one day do I say may only because I want to do new paintings.
Right on. I gotcha.
But enough people have commented that they like Gem Bazaar.
It's
I've been asked
beautiful.
for prints of it, and a lot of, and it was fun to do. I also did it in part because somebody gave me a hard time about Hymn to Turok being top down.
Bullshit.
And I said, watch me do it again.
Mm-hmm. Who gave? I mean, that's ridiculous. Like that Hymn to Turok is cool. Okay, like that's called what cool is, and if you don't get it, that is clearly a problem with you.
This one I will say that I will tell you.
Okay.
Doug Schuler and I were both at a convention in Albuquerque, New Mexico, for War Games West, which was a very big game store in Albuquerque. And at the same time, I had friends in Albuquerque, and there's a writer named Robert Vardaman, and I was friends with him and his wife, Patty Vardaman, and she had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when she was younger and was dying of it at the time of the convention.
Oh.
So I was spending almost as much time at the hospital in ICU visiting her as I was at the con. The convention, however, was also running a charity auction specifically aimed at teens, because it's easy to get teddy bears and toys for children in hospitals.
Right.
Teens get overlooked a lot.
Yeah.
And Magic was more about teens than it was about children. And they said, we're going to raise money specifically for the teens in the children's hospital. And Doug and I offered, because we had that kind of freedom back then, that we would paint the winner of an auction for each of us into whoever won the auction, to raise, and all of the money that was raised we would get paid by WotC for doing the painting, but the money that was raised for the auction would go to the children's hospital. And Doug did, I can't remember, it's the wizard with his hand out with the black globe.
Mm-hmm.
And I did Fraley's Supplicant. That's the husband and wife of the owners of War Games West.
Oh.
Okay. And the thing is that at the time the auction was happening, I had heard that Patty was failing. And so I left the auction early. I asked Doug, I said, whoever wins, will you please get some photographs of whoever it is for me? And Patty made it through that afternoon, that evening. It was like we were having a dead dog party in her hospital room. She couldn't hear us, she was unconscious, but Steve Donaldson was there, and all of the other writers who were friends, Fred Saberhagen had come through, and we would sit and talk to her, and we would talk to each other, and it was almost like a room party. And once the end of the convention was over, the party was over, that's when she passed away.
Wow.
And it was like, this is so, I can only hope to have such a good ending.
Wow, it's like she almost knew that.
And I don't know whether she did or not, but
it makes you wonder,
but it felt right, and it felt good, and I know Bob was eased as much as could be. Losing his wife. To have her surrounded by all of her friends like that.
Mm-hmm.
So Doug was the one who got the pictures of Shirley Godfrey. And if you look at the Fraley's supplicant, the design on her shoulders makes an SG. And the flying cats are her cats. Okay. But apparently he was getting, hi, this is what she looks like. This is her face forward. Here's a profile. And she had a cold and she said, will you just get this over with? And he snapped that picture. And I said, that was the picture I used to paint from. And I felt that his artist eye had spotted just that right moment to capture it. And that's why I asked WotC to include his name on credit for the card.
That's
He
nice.
didn't paint a thing. A lot of people, I was disappointed later because people thought he painted it. It is more realistic than most of the other work I was doing because I was working from a photograph.
Yeah, but it doesn't look that it doesn't look to me, it doesn't look remarkably like, I mean, it doesn't jump like the way you would expect that. It looks like your work. It's like that's what it looks like. Yeah, I know. It's like there's nowhere else to put it. You're multifaceted, and that's disappointing that people would jump to that, because I mean, it would be hard to look and say something like Mind Warp, which I love, by the way, and I almost was going to use it as the backdrop here, but I didn't know if that would be like too freaky for just like. But I mean,
maybe for your audience, it wouldn't bother me. I'm used to it.
I mean,
that's not the weirdest thing I've ever painted.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever painted? I mean, because I love horror. I love like the dark stuff. So the Mind Warp is super dark, and then the background is so. How do you do that? Like that's paint,
actually
right?
a purchased paper that you would use in bookmaking.
Okay, wow.
I did the original drawing. First of all, that warped face, I did traditionally. Nowadays, you can do a button on Photoshop.
Right.
I didn't have Photoshop back then. I don't think Photoshop even existed.
No, not 95.
Take a grid, change the grid, and then copy the drawing over. And that's how I warped that head. But the original one I did on it was a multimedia piece that I did with charcoal and ink and paint. And WotC didn't like it. They liked the image, but they said, we want a more finished looking painting. And so I backed up and did it again, but instead of painting it on a normal white board of any kind, I bought this end paper. Like I said, the kind of thing if you were making handmade books, the end papers, and I painted on top of that.
Wow. And I mean, even the way that I don't know if you managed to do it on purpose, but the coloring inside his mouth, it almost looks like there's like hell kind of coming like from it. It's got this fiery look to it. I mean, it's something else. I mean, like I wish I could have seen it live. It's a crazy painting. Definitely one of my personal favorites. But
well, if you like that kind of thing, see if you can track down. I know it's in the Duelist interview that I did years ago. There's a painting called With a Knot in My Stomach, and it's spelled N-O-T.
I am already interested.
All right.
I will.
I was having a bad time in my life when I did the original sketch, and surrealism has always interested me. I mean, I love fantasy, I love Renaissance, I like imaginative realism, as they say, with Luxcon, which is the focus of that convention.
Mm-hmm.
But surrealism is also an interest of mine. And I was part of an artists group up at Phoenix that was completely dedicated to surrealism. And mostly I was showing my fantasy art. And the head of the group one day, we were preparing for a show at a gallery, and she said, I want you to do a new piece. I don't want one of your fantasy pieces. I want you to do a straight up surrealist, and I want it new. And I went home and I said, okay. And I had this absolutely, literally twisted, you'll have to see it.
I will be
I can
I'll be posting it.
send you a copy if you need.
Absolutely. And I'll post it in the video too, as we're talking about it, because I think that this sounds like quite a story. And when you say you were having a bad time, you just mean like emotionally things were tough, or is that?
I had broken up with the guy I was seeing at the time.
Gotcha.
It had gone very, very badly.
Yeah, gotcha.
It was much better to get it out on paper than it was to keep it inside.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I've talked to so many artists where if you're not doing art, then you're almost, it's like emotional constipation where you're like backed up.
Yeah.
And you have to do it. It's not a choice. It's almost like it's byproduct of being alive. You have to do it. It's no choice.
But the picture was very fine, very finished drawing, but I never expected to do anything else with it. But I looked at it and I said, you know what? This is worth painting. And so I used that as my core, and did that for the show. The best comment I ever had about that is I used to go, like I said, for years and years, I went to lots and lots of conventions, both professional and fan type.
Right.
World Fantasy Con is one that I attended religiously for years, and met again a lot of the artists and a lot of the writers who work professionally in the field, and I got to know people like Alan Clark, who has some of the most magnificent, weird, horrible, terrifying. I love his work.
Yes.
But oh my God, it's creepy.
Yes.
And I think the art panel that I had was like right across from his, where I hung that show. It wasn't science fiction per se. It was just weird. And I wasn't sure that it would be welcomed at the art show. But I'm egotistical enough to want to hear what people think of my work. So I had turned my badge over and was kind of lurking behind people at my panel, because I wasn't well known enough to be talking at a biggest show like World Fantasy. But it was like, okay, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. And I loved the fact that one of the people said, there's a lot of artwork in this art show that's supposed to scare you. This one does.
Ooh.
And I went, thank you.
Yes, like that's I'd be like, can I quote that for my bio, please? Like that's
really.
That is exactly the kind of thing you want to hear when you are attempting that kind of thing. And I won't keep you for much longer, although I'm thoroughly enjoying this. But I do want to touch briefly on the basically. I mean, it's almost the Lord's work what you did with gaming and libraries. I mean, again, for the people, you also have a master's in paralibrary studies. My
master's is library science.
Library science. Which is hard, by the way, I've heard.
No, it's not.
That's not. No, I'm telling you, I knew some smarties who went into it, and like they. I think there's a lot of they make you jump through a lot of hoops to do that.
I'd already been working part-time for Phoenix Library for like 15 years before I said, I need to grow up and get a real job. And that means I want a master's degree in libraries. And I'll just do that because
I'll just get a master's degree. And
well, you're just the thing is, you have to realize that at that point, computer games were taking over tabletop games.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also dealing with my mother dying, and I was her caregiver. And that meant that my ability to pay attention to my own work was decreasing.
Gotcha.
I was also going through the life and progress of my ex and I were starting to fall apart.
That's tough.
Everything was happening at the same time. And I said, gaming isn't going to continue to support me. I need to find, like I said, I need to grow up and get a real job.
Yeah.
And I got the degree. I moved to Tucson to work for the Tucson Public Library, which Pima County Public Library now. And didn't have much time to do the art. And that's where what you were just saying about having to do art came a cropper.
Mhm.
I missed it horribly.
Yeah.
And I, quite frankly, reached the point where I looked around and realized that I got both more money and more respect as an artist than I did as a librarian. And I dropped, I have a very long, a long story that I could tell you because I can talk the ear off a mule.
I mean, you tell the story. I worry about taking up your time, but don't worry about taking up my time.
Yeah, I mean, you can cut it down to whatever you need to.
Oh no, I don't cut. I don't cut out. I mean, like if anything, if it turns into a two-parter, that's good for me because it just. But I'm just saying, don't worry. You don't worry about anything.
I have told this story enough times. I don't want to be too repetitive.
Okay, sure.
If people interview, others have interviewed me and I've told this story a lot.
Right on. Okay.
But, I'll give you a somewhat abbreviated version. I had run across a book called 168 Hours, which has the fallacious subtitle of "You Have More Time Than You Think." 168 hours is the number of hours in a week. And I am convinced that in truth, what you have is less time, not more. I have a lot of issues with the woman who wrote it and a lot of the things she had to say. But it did get me thinking about whether I was doing what I wanted to be doing with my life. And one of the exercises, which was not unique to her, you can find versions of this all over the net, is to make a list of 100 things you want to do or to have in your life. And it doesn't have to be logical. It doesn't have to be possible. It doesn't even have to, they can be mutually exclusive, big, small, reasonable, unreasonable. I want to live in Barcelona and I want to build a straw bale house in the back 40.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I can't do both of those two things.
No.
If you get to 100, go to 1,000. Put it all out on paper. Her advice was then, first of all, take this low-hanging fruit. If you really want to have dark chocolate covered caramels from Trader Joe's in your pantry all the time, do it.
I mean, that would be a problem for me, but
it would be a problem for me. but there are things that'll be on that list. One of mine was be a good dog mom. And it made me realize that, I always spent every morning, the first thing, playing for half an hour with the dogs and always going, I should be getting to work. I should be getting to work. I should be getting to work. And that item on my list made me go, no, this is actually part of sharing my life with these animals.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. This is worth my spending that time with them. But the other part of that 100 things list was to see how things clumped or if there were things that were missing. And even though I was blogging for Library Journal as a games advocate and writing a monthly column for the magazine, that was almost the only thing related to libraries that was on that list. And all of the other things were things that involved making or creating, writing,
Mhm.
art, mosaics, ceramics, building a straw bale house. Okay. All of these, so many of the things were things that we're making.
Yeah.
And that's the point at which I said, at heart, I am a maker.
Right. Right. Like, in
And
fact, you
that's,
said that that's what you would describe yourself as over being an artist, right?
at this point, yes. And that's why. That's exactly how that happened. How that happened to come about was my realizing that what I needed in my life was the chance to be doing this,
Hmm.
and making something, to wake up in the morning thinking of something I wanted to do and go to bed that night having created something that didn't exist when I got out of bed in the morning. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and it took me about 4 or 5 years to make that happen. I dropped back to half-time at the library instead of full-time. Eventually, I left to work, go back to full-time freelance. Thank God for the old school Renaissance with tabletop games, because that made it easier.
Yes. Yes. And the Sorcery of Contested Realms is I just saw that
It's enormous.
it hit its Kickstarter goal. That's for sure.
You could say that,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a way of putting it lightly. What was it, like $5 million or something like?
For $4 million. And
I thought I read five. I swear I read five the other night. Five something. I swear it.
you could, well, depending on, since they're working in New Zealand dollars,
Okay, but
okay,
it's still a
It-
huge success.
it was huge. And it was something like 300,000 is all they needed
Yeah,
to
yeah.
raise. And when they passed, I think, the 1 million mark, they were able to get rights to some of Frank Frazetta's art so that you can be
Jeez.
playing with Death Dealer.
That's. I mean, I saw that and I was like, "Ugh," like,
Yeah. And Ian Miller and so many of the other, I mean, Melissa Benson was the one who turned me on to it. She said, "Are you doing any work for these guys?" And I said, what guys? At that point, I was doing a lot of work for Steve Jackson Games, because Steve Jackson and I go way the hell back. Early Melee Wizard, and all that. And when he did his Kickstarter for rebooting the Fantasy Trip, he came back to me to do the counters and a lot of the interior art and some of the cover art. And I've continued to do other work for him. I had done Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls in 2013. But Sorcery was my first chance to get back into the card game area. And I loved the fact that he wanted traditionally done art. I have no beef at all with digital art. Some of
yeah,
those
I gotcha.
images are just breathtaking, and I couldn't paint that if my life depended on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
It's just that's what he wanted. That was what he was calling for. It's not some sort of statement that.
Exactly. That he wanted to, I mean, if you go online and look up some of his interviews about his philosophy and why he designed the game the way he did and why he got the art the way he did. And a lot of it was, what did we fall in love with about Magic originally?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take those principles and what we have learned in the 25 years, 30 years since, and take the best of both of those two things.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And it certainly shows that there is an audience for it, because was any of you even remotely expecting that kind of success? Because that seems almost, I mean, like, that's like a meteor. It was just like,
I expected it to be successful.
Yeah.
Because the artists I knew, and I know a lot of them as friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew, once we were allowed to talk in public, all of us were going, look, 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 look. Just like the Gathering book, where it was like, hey, we got better in 20 years. We learned a little bit. We didn't just sit around on our hands doing the same stuff we were doing 20 years ago. We're artists, And we learned and we practiced and we strove to be better than we were then. And it's no shade thrown on the art we did then. I'm still proud of it. But
it's
I'm a
just,
hell of a lot better now than I was then.
and I mean, I think that's the goal, right? Of anything. I mean, you want to be,
I would hope so.
yeah. And, and the art is gorgeous, by the way. I mean,
Thank you.
it's
You know,
great.
And given the quality of the work that others are doing, it's like, I need to run even faster to keep up.
Yeah.
And so we're both, there's a friendly competition among those of us who started at the same level. I'm never going to be Ian Miller. I could never aspire to be as brilliant as him. And I'm certainly never going to be Frank Frazetta. But I also spent an awful lot of time looking at Frank Frazetta and when I was learning to be an artist. And so I'm damn proud to be, part of sorcery. And that's literally what I'm not doing as we speak, is, a painting, the first painting for the new sets. It was actually assigned back in December before the Kickstarter, and I haven't had time to work on it.
Oh God, now I really feel like I should let you go and be like stopping you from creating art. No.
Well, I also spent all day yesterday on the couch reading because I couldn't, it was one of those days I needed the downtime. So
Yeah, I gotcha. I mean, I
don't paint 24 hours a day, trust me.
Well, but just knowing that like what eventually will come out will be like so cool. I a little bit of the guilt in the pit of my stomach, but I'll live. But it's
good.
I mean, you expected
you'll get to see this, and I am proud as hell of the sketch. It is. I have set a goal for myself. I try with every painting to do something different, new, I haven't done before. I mean, that's how you learn. And this one has so much going on in it. It's like 3 paintings in one. There's like the main painting and 2 vignettes, most of which those secondaries will be covered by the text box. You'll have to see it in the art card to see the complete painting, much like a Frost and Fire painting. And I know this, I've laid it out with that intention.
That's smart. I mean, you couldn't know that back when you started the game that these things would happen. I think a lot of artists didn't know that. You can't really predict how laying out, you're not going to know about layout until it actually happens, right?
Yes and no. Eric is smart as hell. I think he is possibly the best art director I have ever worked with in 45 years.
Okay.
And his original plan was that every card would have something that was deliberately hidden behind the text box.
That's
so that when you did the art cards, there was something new.
And it gave people something like you'd want to get one so you could see what this thing hidden is going to be.
Was. Yeah. I mean,
That's
that is
clever.
why I did this one this way. This one, the single figure, the main point of the painting was a good painting, but there was nothing happening in the lower 2/3. And to blow it up such that the figure filled the whole space didn't satisfy me. And I said, what am I going to do in this lower third of the painting? And it was like, well, this image has a lot of other history and lore attached to it. Let's include those things.
I mean, it sounds like you're getting, what's nice to hear is that you genuinely sound like you're enjoying the work.
Absolutely.
And
it's
that's
hard.
Good to hear.
It's, the frustrating, this will, usually when I finish a painting, I am so puffed up and proud of it. It's disgusting. You don't want to be around me for the first day or two. It's like, I am a genius. This is the best thing I've ever done. When I did Mirror Realm, which is the piece that is on the playmat, it's undoubtedly the piece that I'm going to be best known for out of all of the sorcery pieces. I had been working on it for so long. I hated it.
You had it with it. You were.
I was done. I never wanted to look at it again. I was sick to death of it. Shoved it in my art files and figured that it was going to be there till hell froze over. Then I was getting into the art files a couple months later, and I pulled it out and I went, this is damn good.
Isn't it funny how that happens?
This is fucking damn good. And I ended up framing it and hanging it over my writing desk in my bedroom. It is literally the last thing I see at night. It's something I look up to and see in the mornings when I'm working at that desk. And people go, I want to buy that one.
I was going to say
that one's not for sale.
Because I was going to say, when you put it away, you're like, I put it in the thing and it's going to be there forever. I was like, yeah, I don't know if that's true, because I'm pretty sure you could probably find a few people who would.
I had people coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
ultimately, once I had looked at it and I had hung it before the Kickstarter. Okay, so I had fallen in love with it before the rest of the world ever saw it. But to me, Melissa Benson's website says she's not selling any of her sorcery originals until she can tell what the real market value is.
Right on, I got you.
She's going, you have no idea how little I sold the
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
And that's true. Most of my Magic originals sold for a couple hundred.
Yeah. And then they would go for a lot more.
I heard that the Mark Tedin's Soul Ring recently exchanged hands for $1 million.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Those are probably the prices that you would be able to get for that. But at the same time, I mean, it sucks that you didn't get that. It legit sucks, but it also puts you in a echelon of artists that are super rare. I mean, to think about that you are an artist that, like, your work could demand that kind of price, that puts you in a very elite category. I mean, does ever, like, you ever stop and think, wow, that's crazy? I mean,
it is crazy. And the prices I've been offered for some of the other pieces even has been, I would have jumped at it. The $100, a couple $100 I got for those older pieces, they paid the bills at the time. I've been asked, aren't you bitter? And it's like, no, bitter is a waste of time.
Right, exactly. It's like, what are you going to do?
Paid the bill. No, it's not that. It paid the bills at the time. It was a fair price at the time. Okay. You could not give away artist proofs for years. Okay. Now people are offering stupid prices for a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
I say stupid not because I mean to denigrate the people. It's it's inconceivable to me that people will pay $50, $70, $150, $300 for a card they can't even play.
Right.
Because it has a blank back. And
it's the secondary market to the secondary market. It's like a cottage industry inside a cottage industry. People go nuts over it, and I love it. I think it's great. I get it. I just I don't have the kind of cheddar to drop on it, but if I did, I could see myself being one of those people. I mean,
and I've loved some of the pieces I've done for people. And
they're great.
I don't know whether my website is up and running right now. It was having trouble a few days ago.
I saw this. I checked it out today. It was the other day. It wasn't up, but it's up now.
Okay. One of the things that I am working, I've got a webmaster who's trying to help me build it back up so it's a little more up to date than just that front page. Hi, I'm here. But one of the things that we've put a lot of time into is examples of all of the artist proofs I've done and the paintings. And some of them are like, this is a pretty damn cool painting. It's a shame it's on a piece of cardboard that you're not going to be able to give your grandchildren. It's not going to live that long. It's not going to last.
You think so? I mean, if it's kept in like the proper environment, it should, right?
Yes, it should. But by the same token, there's stuff that I thought I was taking good care of archivally 30 and 40 years ago, and it's in terrible condition now.
Oh, that sucks.
Okay. Some of it's just, okay, the pages are a little yellowed. I didn't use acid-free paper, and I did that dry. But some of the City of Terrors originals, for example, Flying Buffalo at the time was poor enough that we did not want to pay for all the photo media transfers. What would be now, we would scan the art. And photocopies weren't good enough to print from. So we pasted up the originals with rubber cement, which is a slow chemical fire.
Oh, yikes.
So all of those pieces, except for the few that were full-size pages that were never actually pasted onto anything. And we didn't know about pasting up with wax at the time, which would have preserved the pieces.
Yikes,
But
yeah.
now there's all of this brown charring is literally what it is, chemical charring.
Yeah. And you probably can't get that restored, can you?
You can, not for the original. There are things you can do to stop it. This is part of my archives training in anthropology, in library work rather. And I have an email out to an archivist who has my Fanish collection, the Liz Danforth collection. You know, he originally asked me for some of my early Star Trek stuff. And I said, and while I'm here, do you want this and this and this and this? And he said, hell yes. And, but I've got a note out to him to find out what I can do to slow, if not stop, the continuing burn of that rubber cement.
Yeah.
The images that are printed are fine. And if I were to take a scan of the work today, I can remove that charring look easily enough in Photoshop, so that as a publishable piece of artwork, it's fine.
Right.
As an original piece of art, it's not going to last.
That's heartbreaking.
It's fact of life.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It is a fact of life, but it's you know, it's like you didn't know what you were doing, and you know,
I was a kid. I was in my 20s when I was working for Buffalo. Yeah,
and you know, it's not like it's not any one person's fault. It stinks that you know that happened. That the only way I could put it is just like that's a bummer, but you know.
It's stuff I try and address now. What I do now, I try and make sure it's archival, so that, you know, I was an acquaintance of an artist up in Phoenix, not a magic artist. I mean, he does his own thing. And he literally goes around at Brush and Bulky and picks up trash wood being thrown away, you know, cabinet doors and tabletops and things like that. And he puts his paintings on those. And I said, that's great for recycling, but the prices you're asking imply that these are paintings that are going to last, and they're not. You know, you're painting on crap. Yeah,
wood's going to disintegrate.
It's you know, it's stuff that is not, you know, it's just, you know, it's got the chemicals in it. It hasn't been stabilized. He's going, but it's wood. And I'm going, and it's been processed just like processed food.
Yeah. And like wood is an organic, like, you know, kind of sort of rots. It's live. I mean,
the old masters were painting on wood boards, and that's where he takes the principle from.
Right.
He's not getting clean, new, unused wood. I applaud his desire to recycle. I really do. But I said, do you tell your buyers where this wood comes from? And he's going, oh no. And I said, that's where you're wrong.
Yeah, and also it's not getting the kind of dedication that the old masters paintings get. I mean, they're kept in like, these like vaults that are like, controlled room temperature. They're handled as little as possible. And,
Now they are, but they weren't at the time. I
yeah,
mean,
true, true.
Black Watch was chopped so it would fit through a door. You know?
I was like, did you hear the big brouhaha? I wonder if you even knew about this, because I just learned about costume designers were up in arms about Kim Kardashian at the Met Gala wearing Marilyn Monroe's dress, because there is they were upset because it was the dress that Marilyn Monroe wore to sing Happy Birthday, Mr. President, and it was bought by Ripley's, believe it or not, for $5 million. And I guess one of the rules in museums is once you have something like that, you're not allowed to take it out. It's not supposed to be taken around. And they gave it to Kim Kardashian to wear on the Met Gala. And they were talking about how like her body oils and all this stuff were going to go into the dress and cause it to disintegrate. And they were saying it was unethical. And it sort of sounds, it almost sounds like sort of the same situation that you're talking about, where you're knowingly doing something that is going to be destroying it, or of it being destroyed because of what you're using. And it just seemed similar. Like that makes sense that you should do that as an artist. You should make it known that you're,
what you're buying. I mean,
yeah. And I mean, recycling is a noble thing, but also, there's other ways to recycle and still make stable artwork, right?
Oh yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I mean, one of the reasons many of the old masters on woods, which do decay, which do get termites, which have, they were painting with things that, were killing them and would kill us to deal with. But there are things that can be done to stabilize art. And mediums. I was using masonite that I just bought at the hardware store for a long time, because that seemed about as stable as I could, but I put a thick layer of gesso on it. That isn't as stable as having something that's pH neutral or purpose-made birchwood planks. But it's gonna, it should. And the thing is that most of the stuff we have right now, we don't know if it's gonna last.
Right, it's trial and error.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take 100 years or 200 years or 500 years
to really know.
To find out.
Yeah, like none of us will be around to know the answer,
Yeah, you've got to take the best information you can. Donato Giancola, I've known him for many years. He was already becoming famous when I first met him, but he wasn't then what he is now.
Yeah.
And one of the things he does is he takes a very fine finished sketch and photocopies it.
Yes, and when I interviewed him, he talked about that.
That's right. Okay, yeah, you did. I'd forgotten it. Yes, and I have done some of that on some of my pieces.
You could do that with the gem bazaar too, if
yes.
Like that would work.
Yep. Yeah, just getting it blown up. Sometimes the trick is I'm having trouble. Tucson is 1 million people, but it's still kind of a small town.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And I mean, he's got access to New York City.
Right. I think he has it in his apartment. I think he has the actual machinery to do it, I believe. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I have to go down to Reprographics downtown.
Yeah.
So for me to get, I either paint small, which I generally do, or I have to go down to Reprographics and see if I can get an acid-free paper, but to get the photocopy put onto. But plastic seems to be relatively stable, unfortunately so, when we look at, tote bags in the ocean. And
right. Well, there's a big difference. There's a big difference between creating art that's meant to be, hung versus a Publix bag, and I'm not calling out everybody's bag, whatever plastic bag it is. I mean, There's a
But
difference.
the fact that the plastic should not change over time, and an acid-free paper on a stabilized board should be archival for as far ahead as we can legitimately see, if you're putting oils and acrylics on top of that. Not in that order.
I'd have been like, sounds like it works for me. There's just so much to know. I mean, it's literally an entire, it's amazing really that the amount of knowledge that has been accrued over for everything. But you seem to have accrued a lot of that knowledge. I mean, I'm blown out, and I really there's 1,001 things I could ask you, but what I do want to ask though, before I let you go is, how can people find you online? And is there anything that you're working on now besides what we discussed that you want to talk about, that you can talk about? What would be the way for people to get that information?
Okay, normally the best, it's frustrating because my website is not what I wish it were right now, and I don't have the time to dedicate to making it as good as I'd like it to be. But as long as the website's up and DreamHost isn't having problems, you can always reach me through that. You'll find my mailing address. I do sign cards by mail. When I'm not backlogged, I can do alters and commissions and sketches on my own schedule. I beg people, they have to be patient. Don't send me a card. Don't make the request unless you can wait till I can get to it. But the website has my email address, and that's undoubtedly the most certain way to reach me.
And you have a Patreon too, right?
I have a Patreon, and that actually is what gets most of my attention. I post publicly whenever I can, whenever I think what I'm saying is, and my Patreon supporters are really supportive of me. It is more of an altruistic exchange than a transactional one. It's not like, hi, I'm going to draw you a picture once a month and mail it out to you. I don't have time for that. The people, I make sure to give people everything I can, because they make a huge difference to my income and to the stability of my income. They also give me people to talk to. And by God, it's awful damn nice to have the evidence that people really do like my stuff. Because when you work alone, as many years as I have, and as many years where I was damn near forgotten, having that reassurance, maybe I'm insecure, or maybe it's imposter syndrome or whatever.
It sounds like you're an artist is what it sounds like. I think it's just universal. I don't think there's any way that you can do something like art where it is like inherently isolation, and you can't, once it's released into the world, you can't keep tabs on it. So I see what you're saying. When you have your followers, your fans giving you the actual feedback, I mean, that wasn't available to artists before this.
It's funny. I mean, when I looked at, part of that 100 things list, I ended up writing what I call the Madeira Manifesto, that says, whereas I am all of these things and I want to be all of these things, this is what I want to achieve. This is what I want to do. And that was the model for how I went forward from that point on. But I was going somewhere with that.
But with the Patreon and the fans, or is that what you?
Yeah, it was all part and parcel of that. At the time that I did the Madeira Manifesto thing, the internet did not have things like Patreon. And there were a lot of people going, well, if you put art on the internet, I'm just going to steal it because you put it out there. Why wouldn't I? If you don't like it, you're going to have to reinvent yourself. And it was like, fine, I'm going to fucking reinvent myself. And I've reinvented myself at this point at least 3 or 4, 5 times.
Yeah.
And Patreon is one of the ways that creatives can still make a living. It's not my first thing. My first thing is making brand new art for hopefully hundreds of thousands of people, millions if I can get it.
Yeah, as many as you can possibly get. Yeah.
I mean, I love doing card alterations, but how many people are going to see that?
Yeah, it's a very limited audience just by its nature.
Yeah, and that's fine. That is
Right.
what, at one level or another, that is what art is about. It doesn't have to be popular. The great artists of the world would say, oh, if you're popular, you're bad. And it's like, fuck you.
Well, that's sometimes true, and that's not true also a lot of times. Like, some people can become popular because they're good and a lot of people like them.
My feeling is what I have always attempted to do, and I call myself artist, illustrator, and part of the reason I call myself maker is because it gets rid of all of those classist kind of, oh, well, you're an artist, you're an illustrator, you're not very creative. And it's like, fuck you. I try and make sure, one, that I'm always getting better, and B, that I always put part of myself into it. And to me, that's more the mark of an artist than anybody else's definition. That is my definition. And ultimately, I'm the one who has to be proud of what I send out into the world. And if I want 1 million people to see it, I'm not going to make it any less me than I am fulfilling the obligation. It's like saying, well, you can't write creatively because you're only using 26 letters. No, you can be creative with those letters and say something.
Yeah, exactly. I understand what completely. I mean,
and that applies to art as well.
Yep, parameters are not, they're incidental. Like, you can be creative within whatever space you're given if you're creative.
If you're creative in the first place, and depending on how you choose to apply it.
Yeah.
I'm one of these people that I've got. I hate affirmations. I'm good enough. I'm proud enough. I can do anything. Bullshit. I have things like no crap jobs. Okay. They say freelancers are never supposed to say no. I do, because if I can't do something I'm going to be proud of at the other end, then I don't want to do it. And it's better I say no and not take a job. Say, this does not fit my skill set, or I am too busy to take it and give you the best. A long time ago, I tried, the very first time I went, I left library work, cut it way back. This is years ago, back in Phoenix. I said, if I'm not making the same dollar per hour at art than I was at the library, then I shouldn't be doing the art, because I need to pay my bills. Okay.
True. Yeah.
And
still kind of intimidating, though.
It was, because as a part-timer up there, I didn't have benefits, which meant that my actual hourly pay was very high. I wasn't going to have benefits as an artist, so no difference. But I said, okay, I have this work. I can spend 2.5 hours on this drawing, start to finish. And I did one project with that kind of thing in mind. And it came back from press, and I looked at it and I said, I took shortcuts and it doesn't look good. And I said, I will never let that happen again. And I've shown that book to other people, and they go, this looks fine to me.
Right. Yeah.
I can't see anything wrong with any of the artwork in this book. And I said, I can see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not proud of those pieces. And that book is still out there. You may have to buy it on eBay instead of anywhere else. But I said, I don't care if yes, I care if I'm getting $3 an hour. But if the piece that goes out is something I'm proud of, then it's worth having spent the extra time on. The sorcery piece I'm working on right now is like that. I went through, because it's so complex, I've spent 3 times as long just finishing the sketch as I spent painting the shortest sorcery piece.
Well,
Okay.
you know, you
And
knew.
it's not going to be a short painting to paint it.
No, but you knew. I mean, I read in an interview you knew about this. I mean, you were excited about it before it even had hit its goals, and so now that with the amount of interest that's garnered in it, that there has to be like their fire of that has got to feed into it too, because you know that this is the stage has been set with this thing. So you know, like you get
I'm not
that.
going to make the same mistakes I made with Magic.
Well,
I don't regret them. Like I said, I'm not bitter and I don't regret, but I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. And sorcery, it's clear. I'm sorry I didn't hear about, what is it, Fire and Ice?
um,
Flesh and Blood.
oh, Flesh and Blood. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry I didn't hear about that sooner, because that looks like that's been
It's been
adopted and embraced.
It's very much a success. Yes, absolutely.
And from what I've seen of it, the artwork is gorgeous.
Yeah, that would be the that would
I
be
don't
the
have time
consensus.
to do both. I wish I did. I'm slow. I'm slow as hell.
Well,
But,
you know, I mean, it doesn't seem like, I mean, but it works for you, so that's all that matters. If you
right
know,
now it does. Yeah.
I mean,
And going down the line as far as projects and things like that, now the pandemic is easing off a little bit.
yeah,
I went,
finally,
we'll hope.
yeah, hope so. Hope like fingers crossed. Or
And that we don't have something brand new pop up, which is what I'm expecting.
oh, I'd be so irritated.
Yeah. But I went to my first live event in Dallas for Star City Games in April, and it was a blast.
I know, right?
It was
You were like,
so cool.
like I forgot what human interaction was like. Like,
yeah, I mean, I caught COVID really early. I got it in March of 2020.
oh, that was the bad one then, wasn't it? That was the.
Yeah. Well, I was in France. I was at the Magic event in Lyon, France.
Oh shoot.
Okay, and I had spent a few extra days because I hadn't been in France before. So I was going to museums and I was going to buses, and we thought we were all being careful, washing our hands, but we weren't masking because nobody was masking much.
Yeah.
And I came home on, I guess it was Saturday morning. I'd flown in and out of Phoenix. I'd driven up there because it's often cheaper to fly out of Phoenix than it is to fly out of Tucson. So I'd stayed overnight with friends, stayed with them all day, talked to them about how it was. I was going, nope, I shouldn't hug you. And they're going, come here. I'm in more danger because the husband is a IT guy who works in the medical field. He said, I have to go out. I'm dealing with doctors and essential workers and all the rest of it. So I'm more likely to catch it out there. Gave me a big hug. Wife gave me a big hug. She's a PhD neurophysicist. And, their kid, and we're all having dinner over the table. And the next morning I drove home. Sunday morning, I drove home to Phoenix, to Tucson. I was tired and I had a scratchy throat, but I figured it was just jet lag. And, I'd been gone for 10 days. So I went to the grocery to get more food. Mostly I was going, I'm going to isolate pretty well, but I feel okay aside from this jet lag problem. And 3:00 in the morning on Tuesday, I woke up with the worst chills and fever I have ever had in my life.
God.
Called the doctor. They said, we don't have any tests. don't talk to us. We can't help you.
We can't help you.
What am
Be
I
gone.
supposed to do? We don't have any tests. Don't talk to us. And it was like, great, thanks so much.
Oh, wow.
And I called one, I was running 102 fever by then. And had called one urgent care center, and they said, we don't have the means to help you or see you. We can't help you. Please don't come in.
Fuck.
This is lovely. My doctor won't see me. Urgent care won't see me. I called another urgent care, and they said, we will meet you in the parking lot. Do not come in the building. If you've got a mask, wear it. They met me at the parking lot in full PPE gear and said, hospital is right across the street. Go to the ER right now.
Oh, God.
I mean, he didn't even talk to me beyond getting my basic symptoms. And they walked me through the ER into an isolation room. And I spent the next 10 hours there while they did x-rays, blood, the nasal swabs, which they had to do twice because they weren't experienced doing them. Okay.
That's fun.
Absolutely complete screaming mess because I felt awful. And they said, you're breathing okay, go home and isolate. Come back if you can't breathe.
Okay.
Oh, good. That's going to be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll drive my car while I can't breathe.
Yeah. And so that's basically what I did. I went home, spent several days feeling like shit.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, I think it was like 14 days before they got the test back to say, yes, you tested positive. You're one of the first dozen people in Southern Arizona to have gotten it.
Oh, man. Yeah, you got the bad one. You got Because I got it. I got mine a couple years in, and mine was way nicer.
Yeah, I kept thinking I was better. By the end of April, I was trying to get out and walk the dog again. I was feeling somewhat better. I wasn't, but I had a fever for 6 weeks. I had gastrointestinal problems for 3.5 months. Okay. I did not feel like myself until the beginning of the following year.
That's like long, is that called slow COVID or long COVID? Is that what they call it?
That's long, well, they call it long COVID. They're actually kind of calling it medium COVID because as near as we can tell, I have no further symptoms, although my doctor is a little worried about my heart. I'm seeing an endocrinologist and a cardiologist for what may be related or may simply be my getting old. We don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, hoping for the best for sure.
But yeah, no, that was so many people. I remember I was still on Facebook back then, which mostly now I'm not. It's just too toxic and time consuming.
Yeah. Well, Facebook's kind of on its way out.
Even though I curated my feed, I want to know what other people think. But if it's going to screw up my head and make me insane for days, I can't work. Yeah.
Well, I have a problem with. I have a problem with like the social media, the whole and especially Twitter, the whole notion of putting people. It's like a giant town square where people are thrown to the wolves, like they're thrown into the stocks, and whether they're guilty or not is incidental. Then people get to throw tomatoes at them, make them the villain, and then and basically annihilate somebody without ever having seen the damage that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And as human beings, we're not meant to learn. We're not meant to get information that quickly. We're tribal. We're supposed to there's supposed to be a process that we decide things, and that you can't just snap judgment, say somebody's wrong, somebody's right. This is wrong. This is right. And it's created a society that is so quick to just attack, but it's all online, and it's just I don't. That's the part about it I don't like, is that you see people piling on, whether, and again, it could be for a legit reason, and that's fine, but that just doesn't. Even if that is a reason to, the person is guilty, there still needs to be something in place where people have there needs to be a due diligence. I mean, it's just kind of like how I feel personally.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of why I choose spaces where I control my own
Yeah,
access.
Patreon, because it gives you autonomy. I mean,
Patreon,
you get to,
I mean, I did have to ask one person to leave at one point. It's like, no, your money is not good enough
well, yeah, I mean, you
for me to
can't,
put up with the shit.
yeah,
And
right? Like, I'm not going to be paid to let you
I,
be a jerk.
yeah, I mean, it's the same as there are people that I would not invite under my roof or in my door. I mean,
Really?
and that's true, whatever part of the constellation of human interaction there is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
People
Yeah.
don't want to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And so Patreon is my space. My website is my space.
Yes.
My
Yeah.
space is ancient history, and that's not what I'm referring to. But basically, no, life is too short to fight the world.
Right. Exactly. And there's literally, you just can't get involved with it, because it's always, I mean, when you see somebody attacking like that online, it is saying more about them. Like, it is really just them verbalizing an issue that they have with themselves. I mean, because if you are so unstable that you have to like viciously attack someone that you have a parasocial relationship with, or not even parasocial, maybe you just know of them, it speaks volumes. You know what I mean? It's that's not a healthy person that's doing that, and it is not something this person would say to somebody's face, because anonymity makes people way braver than they should be.
Yeah. By the same token, I vote with my dollars, and I have very strong feelings, but they are to me and for me and about me. And I have, like I said, I have signs on my wall that says, what if this was the last chance you had to do this? Now get to work. Things like that. But one of mine that I picked up a long time ago, is it true? Is it kind? Is it needful? And
I like that.
If you can't say yes to those things, then don't say it.
I have a good one that I love. This was a share quote. She said, "If it doesn't matter in 5 years, it doesn't matter."
Mm.
I was like, that's a good one.
Yep.
And one last question. I think you had made a T-shirt, or you had a T-shirt that said, "And then Buffy staked Edward, the end."
No, that wasn't me.
Oh, that wasn't you?
But
Because
I've seen that.
Okay, because I was like, that's brilliant. Why haven't you turned that into a shirt? I thought maybe you would. I was like, that needs to be. I was like, I was about to ask, can I get your permission just to print one of them? Because
that is someone else's artwork. I've seen it and I applaud it enormously. I agree.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, I thank you so much for this. This has been it's been a wonderful time, and I thank you again for doing this. It's always an honor to get one of the early artists in. It's just, you've made my day.
I appreciate you asking me, Albert. I really do.
Again, really, I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And you have a great rest of your day.
And you too. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Isn't Liz incredible? Her work ethic is something else. And, not that it matters, but I was actually productive, a la Liz, while the interview was airing. Check out this piece. I call it The Inauguration of the Mechanical God.
Did you use crayons?
It's oil, actually. An amateur's mistake.
What brand did you use?
That's not important. What's important is the message.
Which is...
For you to shut it! And you know what else is important? Shouting out our patron Matthew V. Your support means everything to us. Well, that's all for me now. I have some leftover oils left over, and I feel a fresca coming on. Fresco.
Bye-bye.